She stepped into the courthouse just after sunrise, the early light casting a dull glow on the stone walls of the building. It was the kind of morning where breath hung in the air, not from cold, but tension. The halls echoed with the shuffling of papers and footsteps, yet she moved in silence. No attorney beside her, no reporters trying to snap photos, just another name on the witness list. No one looked twice. Her name was Claire Monroe, and to the court, she was just a former humanitarian worker. She walked past security checkpoints with steady hands and even steps, her ID checked, her bag scanned, no questions asked. But the guard at the final gate paused. "Purpose of visit. Witness for the prosecution," she said calmly. "No legal counsel? Don't need one." Something about her voice made the guard glance again at her ID, then back at her. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. He nodded once and waved her through. Inside Courtroom 4C, the air felt heavier. The Meridian defense trial had been going on for weeks, dominating every news channel. The defense, a wealthy private military company, stood accused of unlawful operations and civilian deaths overseas. Their attorneys came armed with layers of strategy, and the prosecution had only a few solid witnesses left. Claire was the next. She took a seat in the back, waiting. Her clothes were plain. Navy jacket, black shirt, slacks. Her hair tied back. No makeup. Nothing about her looked unusual. That was intentional. As the courtroom filled, whispers passed between reporters, military officials, and legal teams. But none were about her. Not yet. When Judge Elliot Harmon entered, the room stood. He was a former military man himself, known for strict order and zero tolerance for theatrics. Once the room settled, the clerk called the case back into session. The prosecutor, Rachel Kumar, requested to call her next witness, Claire Monroe. Claire stood, walked forward, and was sworn in. She sat without fidgeting. Rachel stepped up. "For the record, state your name and occupation." "Claire Monroe. I was an aid coordinator assigned to the Kadari region between 2015 and 2018. She spoke with a steady tone. Not rehearsed, but clear. Rachel nodded and continued, asking her to describe what she saw in May 2018, the day Meridian's forces allegedly struck a small village in the mountains. Claire gave dates, coordinates, and described the damage in chilling detail. Her words were precise, like someone recalling a list she'd memorized, but there was no doubt it was memory, not fabrication. She talked about homes flattened in strange, clean patterns, destruction that didn't match how insurgents usually attacked, about a young girl who clutched her hand as they searched for a missing brother under concrete. She told them about injuries no local militia could cause, and she supported every word with images. Photographs she'd taken, reports she'd written, all presented without emotion, but heavy all the same. At one point, Rachel paused, then asked, "And you're certain it was Meridian's personnel on site afterward?" Claire didn't hesitate. Yes, no flags or identifiers, but the gear was theirs. So were the drones, the way they moved, the way they cleaned up. They weren't army. They were private. Across the room, Meridian's attorneys shifted. Their lead counsel, Daniel Westlake, finally stood. "Your Honor," he said, smoothing his tie, "the defense questions this witness's authority to interpret military behavior. She isn't trained for that." Judge Harmon didn't blink. "She's testifying to what she saw, not what it meant." Overruled. Claire continued, calm, straight-backed. Just as the silence in the courtroom grew tight, Westlake stood again, this time with a smirk. "Miss Monroe, you claim to have been at these coordinates on May 17th. But we have satellite images, dated the same day. No aid vehicles, no civilians, just insurgents. How do you explain that?" Claire glanced up at the screen as the images flickered on. Grainy aerial shots of rough terrain, time-stamped. "They're wrong," she said. "That's not what it looked like that day." "Are you saying these government-supplied images were doctored?" "I'm saying they don't match the time of day. The satellite passed over that region at 2:32 p.m. local. These shadows show it's before noon. Either they're from another day, or someone changed the data." The courtroom shifted again. Westlake's smirk thinned. The judge leaned in, squinting at the screens. "Mr. Westlake, Can you verify these images' authenticity? Westlake turned, whispering fast to his co-counsel. A young man handed him a folder. We maintain they're accurate, but we'll provide more documentation. Judge Harmon nodded slowly. We'll review that. But before we proceed, Miss Monroe, courtroom protocol requires that I ask you to remove your jacket. Standard procedure. We need to ensure no recording devices are present. A simple request. Witnesses were always checked, but there was something about the judge's voice. Something heavier. Claire stood. The courtroom quieted. She pulled her arms through her jacket sleeves and folded it neatly, revealing a plain black t-shirt underneath. But as she laid the jacket on her lap, eyes turned to her left sleeve. A faded tattoo, not elaborate but distinct. A circle eclipsing a triangle of stars. The air stopped. Judge Harmon stared. His jaw clenched. Then he whispered, low but clear, "That's not possible." Westlake's expression turned white. He stood suddenly, his voice rising. "Your Honor, we move for immediate recess." Before Harmon could respond, two men entered from the back of the room. Suits, no badges. Eyes locked on Claire. Court security moved in fast, intercepting. "Court is recessed until tomorrow," Harmon said sharply. "Miss Monroe will remain available." As the room emptied in confusion, Rachel moved quickly to Claire. "What just happened?" she whispered. Claire stared forward, unmoving. "They saw it. They know who I am." An hour later, Claire sat quietly in Judge Harmon's chambers. The air was colder here, more controlled, but tense in its own way. She didn't speak until he closed the door and signaled the security officer to remain just inside. Rachel stood nearby, arms crossed, studying Claire like someone realizing they had never actually seen the person in front of them before. Judge Harmon stood behind his desk, gripping the edge with both hands. He didn't sit. "That insignia," he said slowly, "it belonged to a unit that was dissolved. Shadow Echo. Disbanded in '89. Classified. Officially, yes," Claire said. "Unofficially, it was reactivated in 2003. Black level operations." "You're telling me you served with Shadow Echo?" "I didn't just serve," she said. "I led the last mission." Harmon looked away, pacing now. "You understand what you're saying? That group doesn't exist on any active roster. There's no chain of command." "I know, because they burned it down after Kazari." Rachel stepped forward. "Are you saying Meridian wasn't just cleaning up a bad operation? They were erasing your team?" Claire opened her bag and pulled out a thin folder, sealed with an unmarked strip of black tape. "This is classified above your current clearance, but you have the right to know, given your previous service." She slid it across the desk. Harmon opened it. His face changed as he read. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally something colder. "This says Shadow Echo was inserted into Kazari under Operation Shadowfall. No official boots on the ground, just your team. And when the mission went sideways, they sent Meridian," Claire said, "to erase us. And the villagers. Everyone." Rachel's voice had dropped. "Why are you coming forward now? Why not through official channels?" "They're gone," Claire said quietly. "My CO's dead. Command scrubbed. Everyone who knew what we did is either compromised or buried. I tried. Through back channels. No one would touch it. Then Meridian's trial came up. It was the first time I saw the names. The locations. They didn't just kill civilians. They finished the job they started 5 years ago." Harmon sat now, rubbing his hands together. "You realize the storm you're walking into?" Claire nodded. "I'm already in it." Rachel's eyes were still locked on Claire. "Those two men who tried to approach you in the courtroom, were they government?" Claire didn't answer right away. Then she looked her in the eye. "They weren't there to protect me." "Then who sent them?" "Same people who signed the cleanup order." The judge tapped the folder, still open in front of him. "You have proof. Not everything, but I've been collecting pieces for years. Satellite logs. Communication threads. I still had access to drops for a while, before they cut me off. I pieced it together. And you're not worried what happens if this comes out?" "I'm dying anyway," Claire said plainly. Rachel blinked. "What?" Claire reached into her pocket, pulled out a small pill bottle, and set it on the table. "Lung cancer. Stage 4. Chemical exposure. Operation Nomad Spring, 2015. Of course, That op doesn't exist either. Judge Harmon sank back. So you've got 6 months? Maybe less, Claire said, but long enough. The room stayed quiet for a beat too long. Later that evening, Claire sat in a hotel room secured by court officers. The TV was off. Her window looked out over the city, but she wasn't watching the lights. She was reviewing a series of coded notes, secure drives, timestamp photos, and transcripts. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Echo actual inbound. 0900. She stared at it for a long time. Elsewhere across the capital, ripples of the day's events were already spreading. A retired general named Cal Riker received a call from a secure line. He didn't ask questions, just started packing. Rachel discovered that portions of the prosecution's digital files had been accessed, altered, and reclassified within the last 72 hours without authorization. Someone had gone into the system and removed key segments tied to Claire's upcoming testimony. At Meridian's downtown headquarters, executives sat in a closed room, reviewing video stills from the courtroom. One man circled Claire's image on a screen. She was terminated. This shouldn't be possible. She's not just a witness, another said. She's the last loose thread. The next morning, Courtroom 4C looked entirely different. Uniformed military officers filled the back rows. Plainclothes agents monitored each door. Federal attorneys had arrived, shadowing the existing defense team. Metal detectors had been added at both entrances. The sense of formality had been replaced by something closer to containment. Judge Harmon stepped in. Before we resume, I've received an emergency motion from the defense. Westlake stood. His voice wasn't as strong as the day before. We request the court exclude the witness on national security grounds. Her presence, her testimony, could expose classified operations still deemed active. Before Harmon could reply, a man in a dark suit rose behind the defense table. Maxwell Thornton, Department of Justice. Commander Monroe's testimony risks revealing sensitive field details tied to operations which. Claire stood. The room fell silent. She was thinner now, her cheekbones more defined overnight, but her back was straight. Her voice was low and steady. Commander Claire Monroe. Shadow Echo. Special Operations. Honorably discharged, 2018. She walked forward, placed a sealed envelope on the evidence table. This folder contains operational records tied to Operation Shadowfall. They document the actions Meridian was hired to erase, including the deaths of 37 civilians and 5 American operators. Thornton started to rise, but a voice stopped him. She has every authority to testify. It came from the back of the courtroom. General Cal Riker stood in full dress uniform. If Commander Monroe says it happened, it happened. The room erupted. Security moved in. Westlake demanded recess. Thornton shouted for classified containment. The judge slammed his gavel 3 times. Order. This court will recess for 1 hour while I consult with national security advisors. No one leaves the building. As the room emptied, Claire nearly lost her balance. She gripped the table, eyes closed, jaw clenched. Rachel reached her side. Are you all right? Claire's voice was a whisper. I will be. Just need to sit. 2 hours passed before the proceedings resumed. Not in the courtroom, but in a sealed conference room adjacent to it. The windows were covered. Phones were confiscated. The tension in the room was heavy as concrete. Present were Judge Harmon, General Riker, Claire, Rachel, Westlake, and his legal team, Thornton from the DOJ, 2 Pentagon observers, and a silent man for the National Security Council who declined to identify himself. This is unprecedented, Thornton began. Commander Monroe is attempting to release information that is, by every classification protocol, top secret. This meeting itself is barely authorized. She's not revealing secrets, Rachel countered. She's revealing a crime. Harmon motioned for silence and looked at Claire. You're certain about everything you've stated? Yes, sir. And you understand the legal risks involved? Claire gave a faint nod. I've accepted them. Thornton was still shaking his head. Shadow Echo doesn't exist. We have no record of this unit in active operations post-1989. Because the record was scrubbed, Riker said, leaning forward. But I served with Echo. I helped select its 2003 reactivation team. Claire Monroe was on it. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Redacted, but it's there. Her name, rank, ops history, partial confirmation. Harmon flipped it open and studied it. This matches what Commander Monroe provided earlier. Thornton wasn't convinced. Even if she served, it doesn't mean her testimony is accurate. We're dealing with a severely ill individual, possible combat stress. I have evidence. Claire cut in, her tone sharper. Original SAT data. Field comms from Meridian's tactical net. I received them from someone with clearance, Major Quillen. Signal intelligence. He got them from internal nodes before they were erased. Westlake narrowed his eyes. You're telling us you're in contact with someone leaking active intel? No, Claire said. I'm telling you someone finally stepped up because this time they realized what we lost. She pulled out a small drive. This has the unaltered mission logs from May 17th, 2018. You'll see that there were no insurgents in the village. Meridian's own people confirmed it before launching. You'll also hear direct orders to complete a strike regardless of occupants. Their words, site must be sanitized. There was silence. Even Thornton couldn't speak right away. Riker spoke next. There's more. Meridian wasn't acting alone. They were given that cleanup order by someone high enough to bypass all standard oversight. Who? Rachel asked. Claire answered without hesitation. Deputy Director Martin Wells, JSOC Operations Liaison. He signed Directive SC I-7734. It authorized deployment and post-mission containment. We were the mission. Meridian was the containment. And he's still alive? Harmon asked. He is, Riker said grimly. But he's not alone. He claims he acted under the direction of former Secretary of Defense Callahan. Callahan's dead, Rachel noted. Last year. Stroke. Heart attack, Claire corrected. Convenient timing. Harmon closed the folder. Here's what's going to happen. We reconvene tomorrow. Secured session. No press. No gallery. Clearance-level attendance only. Commander Monroe will testify. Evidence will be presented on record under seal. And the DOJ? Rachel asked, eyes on Thornton. Thornton sighed. I'll submit a recommendation to permit classified testimony under judicial discretion. It's not what they'll want, but it's too late to shut this down quietly now. They adjourned without another word. That night, Claire returned to her hotel room. She felt the weight in her bones more than usual. She moved slower. Her breath came shorter. But she wasn't done. She connected the drive to a secure laptop. Dozens of files unfolded. Images, logs, voice clips, timestamps. The cold proof of what she'd been saying for years. The kind of evidence that didn't just make headlines. It cracked foundations. Her hand trembled slightly as she worked, but she didn't stop. At 2:13 a.m., she closed the laptop. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Quillen. They're watching. Be ready for tomorrow. No more second chances. The next morning, the courtroom resembled a war room. Armed security at every entrance. Windows blacked out. All electronics surrendered. Only those on the classified clearance list were allowed inside. Rachel adjusted her files, watching Claire enter slowly in a wheelchair, a port still visible in her arm. Her skin was pale, but her eyes were focused. Judge Harmon looked across the room. This proceeding is now under TSSCI classification. Commander Monroe, you may proceed. Claire sat forward, hands on her knees. Shadow Echo was deployed to Kazari in 2018 under Operation Shadowfall. Our mission was to extract an embedded asset, a linguist who had been gathering intel for over a year. Meridian's job was to hold the perimeter. That's it. She paused. But that's not what happened. She began detailing the sequence of events. Satellite images appeared on the screen, and censored, time-stamped. Then came the audio logs. Meridian's team confirming no enemy presence. Confirming the village was not a threat. Confirming civilians, children. Then the command. Proceed. Sanitize the site. Leave no witnesses. Everyone in the room heard it. Claire pulled a small cloth bundle from her coat. Inside were dog tags. One by one, she placed them on the witness stand. Lieutenant Sam Collins. shot trying to pull children from the blast zone. Captain Lacey Duran, executed after refusing to obey follow-up orders. Sergeant Rico Estevez, found with a bullet to the head. Last logged, saying this isn't what we signed up for. Each name was a punch to the chest. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. General Riker stood. He raised his hand in a sharp salute. Without a word, 2 other officers stood and followed suit. After a pause, Judge Harmon rose. He too saluted. Claire saluted back, her first military gesture in open court. She was still a commander. The courtroom held its breath. Then Westlake rose, his face unreadable. Commander Monroe, with all due respect, if your claims are true, why weren't they documented through official channels at the time? They were, she said, but they were classified, buried, all trace deleted, because we weren't supposed to be there. Isn't it possible your trauma and illness are affecting your recollection? Claire held his gaze. I've lost memory of faces, places, but not this. Not what happened in that village. Not the smell. Not the orders. Not the silence afterward. Why come forward now? He asked. Because I'm out of time, she said. Nothing to lose? No, she said softly. Everything to finish. Suddenly, her eyes fluttered. Her grip tightened on the stand. She gasped, then collapsed. Panic erupted. Medical staff rushed forward. Harmon called for emergency evacuation. Claire was unconscious before they could reach her. Rachel followed the gurney as they wheeled her out. Harmon stared at the tags on the table, then to the drive still inserted in the court system. Everyone knew, and no one could unsee it. Claire lay in a quiet, dim hospital room at Walter Reed, her face pale under the soft lights. Machines beeped gently beside her bed. The nurses moved quietly, aware that this wasn't just another patient, though the name on the chart didn't reflect anything extraordinary. To them, she was just Claire Monroe, but to the people who sat beside her bed, she was the center of a storm. Rachel sat by the window, documents open on her lap but untouched. She hadn't spoken in an hour. Her mind kept replaying the courtroom collapse, Claire's body going limp, her face drained of color, her strength gone all at once. It was like watching a soldier fall in slow motion. And the look in her eyes, right before she fell, like she had more to say, like she wasn't finished. General Riker entered quietly, removing his cap, his face unreadable. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. War-age people, even if they weren't on the battlefield anymore. He glanced at Claire, then turned to Rachel. She awake yet? Rachel shook her head. Still out. Doctor says the collapse was a combination of stress, dehydration, and the cancer. Her body's giving out faster than expected. Riker stared at Claire, his jaw tight. She always pushed past the red line. Did she ever talk to you back then? Rachel asked. After Shadowfall? She tried, Riker admitted. But I didn't believe her. I thought it was grief. Delusion. I thought. Maybe she was trying to make sense of losing everyone. We all needed something to blame. Rachel closed her file. Now. Riker's shoulders fell. Now I know she was the only one telling the truth. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Claire stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpened as she took in the room. When she saw Riker and Rachel, she exhaled, tired but present. How long? She asked. Couple of hours, Rachel said gently. Claire shifted slightly, wincing from the pain. Did they stop the testimony? No, Riker said. It's on hold. The judge has sealed everything until you're cleared to continue. Claire smirked faintly. He won't be able to hold that line for long. Rachel hesitated. You don't need to go back, Claire. You've already done more than anyone expected. I'm not done, Claire said, her voice thin but firm. I didn't start this just to crawl to the edge. I need to finish. Riker crouched beside her, voice low. You've proven your point. Meridian's defense is crumbling. The government's already talking about internal reviews. People are watching now. Claire turned to him. Watching isn't enough. They watched before and still let it happen. If this fades into another closed-door deal, then everything we did, everything we lost, it dies again. Rachel reached out, touching Claire's hand. You don't have to carry it all alone. I do, she said. I'm the last one left. The next morning, against medical advice, Claire insisted on returning to court. She arrived in a wheelchair, dressed in full uniform for the first time since the day she left active duty. It hung loose on her thinner frame, but it carried weight. Authority. Memory. The courtroom was even more guarded now. Rumors had begun leaking in D.C. about a trial, a secret unit, buried war crimes. No one had hard proof, but the whispers were growing. The government wanted to contain it, but the fuse had been lit. Judge Harmon watched Claire wheeled into position. He looked tired too. "Commander Monroe," he said quietly, "are you certain you're able to continue?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then proceed." Claire adjusted in her chair and began again, this time not with evidence, but with names. She recited them slowly. Soldiers, medics, analysts, every operator from Shadow Echo who had died in Khazari or shortly after. No ranks, just names, just people. The courtroom listened in silence. Even Westlake didn't move. Most of them never even got a flag on their coffin, Claire said, because technically they didn't exist. She leaned forward slightly, breathing heavier now. They followed orders. They believed they were making a difference. And when those orders changed, when they were told to lie, to cover up, to stand down, they refused. That's why they died. Rachel wiped her eyes quietly. Claire reached into her coat and produced one last file. A simple one, not classified, not sealed. Inside were handwritten letters, copied versions of the final notes left by her team. "I don't want these sealed in some archive," she said. They were people. They had doubts. They asked questions. They knew something was wrong. She passed the file to the bailiff. "If this court believes in justice, then let their words be heard." Westlake stood again. This time his tone had changed. "Commander Monroe," he said carefully, "Meridian maintains that any action taken in Khazari was based on intelligence reports and operational necessity. That includes decisions made in the moment." Claire tilted her head. "You mean their commander saying sanitize the site regardless of occupants? That moment. Are you suggesting your team was targeted?" Claire nodded. "I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it. 3 of us survived Shadowfall. The others died in the field or shortly after. Accidents, suicides, medical failures, patterns too convenient to ignore. And you?" "I disappeared," she said. "Changed my name. Burned my records. Waited. Why now?" Claire looked around the room. "Because I got sick. Because the truth mattered more than my safety. Because someone had to say it out loud in court with proof. Even if it's just once." The courtroom fell quiet again. Then the doors opened, and a Pentagon representative entered, whispering to the DOJ. Judge Harmon called a recess, but not before giving Claire a nod. It wasn't approval, it was respect. As she was wheeled out of the room, Claire whispered to Rachel, "If they offer a deal, make sure they admit it. All of it. Don't let them slide on the record." Rachel nodded, already knowing what was coming. Ready for next section? 3 days passed before the courtroom reopened, and in that time, the quiet machinery of Washington politics turned faster than usual. Meetings behind closed doors. Phone calls with no paper trails. Statements half-written, ready to be released or buried, depending on the outcome. But one thing had become clear. Claire Monroe had shifted the center of gravity. Her testimony was no longer just a problem. It was a threat. Rachel stood outside the courtroom that morning, waiting for her turn to speak to the press. She wasn't allowed to say much. The gag orders were clear, but that didn't stop reporters from hovering nearby, whispering names like Shadow Echo, Black Ops, civilian casualties. Inside, Judge Harmon reviewed a stack of documents submitted by Meridian's legal team. Their faces were stiffer now. The confidence had bled out of them slowly, day by day. The trial had started as a defense of protocol, then shifted to damage control, and now it felt like desperation. Claire sat quietly at the front. Her breathing was slower, her face thinner, but her eyes remained sharp. She watched everyone carefully, like someone who knew how quickly things could change when power started to panic. "Court is in session," Harmon announced. "Before we resume testimony, the defense has requested an emergency motion." Westlake rose, voice less sure than before. "Your Honor, in light of the classified evidence presented and the potential risks to national security, We request the court halt this proceeding and refer all materials to the Department of Defense. Harmon didn't blink. That request was already reviewed and denied. There is precedence for, and there is precedence, Harmon cut in, for this court to continue when truth demands it. You may continue your questioning. Westlake sat back down, defeated for now. Rachel stepped forward, presenting the newest evidence, documents from the thumb drive Claire had received. Original satellite images, communication logs, internal memos, all showing that Meridian security team had known, without question, that no insurgents were present in the village the day of the attack. These aren't just operational lapses, Rachel said, voice firm. They're deliberate decisions to conceal, alter, and destroy evidence of a massacre. Claire remained still as the documents were passed around, but her fingers tapped slowly on the armrest of her chair. A small rhythm, like she was counting down. General Riker had returned to the courtroom too. He stood quietly in the back, watching the people he once trusted squirm under the weight of exposure. He had given up a lot to be there, reputation, favor, maybe even his career. But watching Claire speak had brought something back in him. A sense of duty that time had tried to dull. Commander Monroe, Westlake said carefully, you allege that Meridian was ordered to sanitize the village. Can you confirm who gave that order? Claire took a slow breath. The directive came from Joint Special Operations, but the field order was signed by Meridian's regional commander. He received confirmation from Deputy Director Martin Wells. And you have proof of that communication? Claire nodded. In the logs. Coded directives cross-referenced with GPS data. We intercepted them before we lost comms. Why would they order the removal of witnesses, including American operatives? Because we refused to lie, Claire said. Because we had footage, reports, body counts. They needed the site clean and the silence total. Westlake paused. You said earlier that only 3 operators survived. Where are the others now? Claire looked directly at him. You mean besides the ones who died in staged suicides? One's in a psych ward under a different name. The other disappeared completely 2 years ago. I'm the last one standing in daylight. And why would the government allow this? Why would anyone approve such an action? Because sometimes the truth costs more than silence, she said. Because if they admitted we were operating in Khazari, Congress would have pulled the funding and careers would have ended. So they covered it up, and when it started to unravel, they hired someone to burn the pieces. Riker stiffened in the back row. He'd suspected it. He just hadn't heard it said aloud. Westlake turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense requests time to verify the authenticity of these documents. Denied, Harmon replied. They've been independently verified by a military analyst assigned by the court. Proceed. Claire shifted in her chair. She looked weaker now, slumping slightly. Rachel stepped forward. Your Honor, the witness needs a break. No, Claire said quietly. Let's finish. Westlake looked back at her. One final question, Commander. What do you want? Justice? Revenge? Recognition? Claire's eyes didn't move. I want the names of my team to mean something. I want the families to know why they never came home. I want systems like this to stop killing the people who serve them just to protect a contract. That's not revenge. That's the bare minimum. The judge nodded slowly. We'll reconvene after a short recess, he said. As the courtroom cleared, Rachel leaned at Claire. You're done for today. Claire nodded weakly, not arguing. She didn't have the strength left to push back. That night, the plea agreement was drafted behind sealed doors. Meridian would admit to multiple violations, civilian deaths, obstruction, falsification of records. They wouldn't publicly confess to murder, but they would fund reparations through international channels. Families of the fallen would receive benefits, as if their service had been recognized. Shadow Echo would remain classified, but not forgotten. The next day, Claire was back at Walter Reed. The courtroom would continue without her, but she had finished her part. Her hands trembled now. The pills didn't work like they used to. But when Rachel and Riker arrived with the signed agreement, she didn't cry. She just nodded once and whispered, good. 2 weeks later, the courtroom filled one last time, not for argument or cross-examination, but for the formal conclusion of the case. It was quieter than before, yet heavier, like the room itself remembered everything that had happened within its walls. Reporters weren't allowed inside. Only those with the highest clearances were present, along with a few families who had been given temporary access. Their eyes showed hope, confusion, and hurt, all mixed together in a silence that said more than any words could. Judge Harmon took his seat, his face unreadable. This court acknowledges the plea agreement submitted by the defense and accepted by the prosecution. He began, "The defendants have agreed to the following: acknowledgement of responsibility for unauthorized military actions, falsification of after-action reports, destruction of protected property, and obstruction of justice." There was no dramatic gasp, just the sound of pens moving, documents being recorded, and in one corner of the room, a quiet sob from a woman holding a folded flag. For the record, Harmon continued, "While portions of this agreement will remain sealed for national security reasons, this court insists on acknowledging the integrity and sacrifice of Commander Claire Monroe, without whom none of this would have come to light." Everyone turned as two security officers entered the courtroom, wheeling Claire into the room. She was thinner now, her skin nearly translucent, but her eyes scanned the room with sharpness and intent. When her name was read aloud, she sat a little taller. Not for pride. For them, the ones who never made it back. Riker stepped forward and placed something on the bench in front of the judge. A simple folder. The original insignia patch from Claire's team. A shadowed eclipse and 3 stars. "Commander Monroe has requested that this insignia be entered into the sealed military record," Riker said, "in recognition of a unit that never officially existed." Harmon looked at it, then nodded slowly. Request granted. When the courtroom cleared, no one rushed out. People lingered, shaking hands, sharing quiet words, staring at the place Claire had been sitting, as if something important had passed through and they weren't quite ready to leave it behind. That night, Claire was moved to a long-term care room in Walter Reed. The doctors had stopped talking about treatment. They only talked about comfort now. But Claire, true to form, had one last mission. She asked Rachel to help her send letters. One for each family of her fallen team. Simple things. A short memory. A photo she'd kept. A detail no one else would know. A small, human truth to honor a life erased by redaction. One letter stood out. It was addressed to the daughter of Captain Leona Frost. "Your mom always hummed the same song before every mission," Claire had written. She said it helped her think. "You probably don't remember it, but she sang it holding your baby photo." Said it reminded her what she was fighting for. Each letter was signed the same way. For what it's worth, she wasn't alone. She was with me. CM. The letters went out quietly, no official stamp or return address. But every one of them was read more than once. In late spring, a ceremony took place in a private Pentagon conference room. No live stream, no media, just families and a few military officials who knew too much to speak in public. They handed out medals, silver stars, purple hearts, official acknowledgments that never would have happened without Claire. She sat in her wheelchair, oxygen tube in her nose, hands folded neatly. One by one, the families came to her, and each time, she found the strength to speak. "She covered your son's body when the shooting started. That's how he knew where to dig. He was the one who said, 'This isn't right,' and sent me to find help. He saved my life." She wanted her parents to know she still remembered that hiking trip you took when she was 15. Said it made her believe in good things. By the time the last family approached, Claire looked exhausted, but she stayed until the very end. As Riker wheeled her out, she whispered, "Now I can go." 3 weeks later, she passed in her sleep. No dramatic moment. No final words. Just peace. Her obituary in the Washington Post said only that she had served in U.S. Special Operations and was awarded multiple citations. There was no mention of Shadow Echo. There never would be. Not officially. But at Arlington, beneath her name, someone had carved the eclipse insignia. In the months that followed, quiet changes began. Regulations passed through Congress, stricter controls on private military contractors, clearer rules of engagement, tighter oversight. Behind closed doors, they called them the Monroe Protocols. No one said her name on the floor, but everyone knew why the bill passed. Rachel was promoted to lead a new task force on military contractor reform. Her first case was already waiting when she arrived. A similar story, different name, different place, but the same kind of silence trying to cover the same kind of truth. Before she opened the file, she placed a photo of Claire on her desk, not as a reminder of what was lost, but what one person could do, even in the shadow of giants. At the War College, Riker added a new lecture to his ethics course. He never named names. He didn't have to. The cadets listened closely. They understood. Sometimes, he told them, the quietest voice in a room is the one that saves lives. If you ever find yourself in a moment where duty and orders don't line up, remember her. Remember what it means to stand alone. And in a restricted hallway deep inside the Pentagon, a technician updated the Wall of Honor. No fanfare, just new names. Real ones this time. Photos and dates. Evidence that they had lived and served and mattered. At the center, next to 3 stars arranged in a triangle, was the photo of a woman whose story had changed more than just a courtroom. It had changed the system. Moral. Sometimes, justice begins not with power, but with one tired voice refusing to be silent, because the truth, even buried deep, always finds a way to rise. Story complete, white heavy check mark. Let me know if you'd like a summary, Urdu version, or video script. Ask ChatGPT.